Fix the mic!
Mike is so warm. Providing concrete solutions and hosting contests like this will happen again next month.
Put on, we can't hear them.
Turn it up! Closer to the mic.
So, as I was saying, one thing Bike Lanes of War has done is to make cycling a lot more mainstream, as Derek has already mentioned. And this would not have been possible without all of you, a group such as BCBC, Cycle Toronto, Young for All, Friends and Families for Safe Street, Stephen Suzuki Foundation, Trailway Cyclists for
They didn't turn the speaker up. I turned all the way down.
However, despite this big tent of support, despite the successes, and despite the fact that there have been calls for Bike Lanes of War for almost 50 years, Doug Ford wants to throw all of that out the window.
Throw him out the window!
Yeah! Here when Toronto had a record number of cyclists killed, 6 this year alone. I know. And one thing we need to recognize is road safety is not a partisan issue. There are people out here who vote conservative, who do bike, and who do support making our streets safer for all road users. But this does more than just on making this a partisan issue, along with all the other screw-ups he's done, whether it's Ontario Place, Highway 413, the Greenbelt, or our healthcare system. The Way Safe Street supporters have the moral obligation to vote Ford out of office! Scarborough, Etobicoke, North York, and the 905 where a lot of the progressive conservative seats currently are. So I'll conclude with one point in which saving lives is a lot more important than saving time, which this legislation may not end up doing, by the way.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Zane Curran, who is the transit lead with the Toronto Youth Cabinet.
Before I start, I just want to give Zev and Ava a very big thank you for organizing this. They're students. Let's give them a round of applause. So when I first heard about Bill 212, I was horrified, much like many of you. This is a bill which will make it much harder for people to get around and much more dangerous for the people in this city. I personally had a job this summer where I had to bike across Toronto, from Scarborough to Etobicoke. It was, I spent a lot of time on the blower Danforth bike lanes. They're much faster than the TDC and way faster than if you were to drive. But most importantly, I felt like I had a right to be there. I felt safe. There was once when I had to bike down Royal York in Etobicoke, and although it has painted bike lanes, it felt more like a highway, with all the cars zipping by me with barely enough space for me to pass by. And let me tell you, I have never felt more scared for my life. And I can't imagine how different my experience would have been if there were no bike lanes at all. Bike lanes, especially protected and separated bike lanes, make all the difference. It keeps us safe. And it allows us to ride with dignity and respect. So I'm the transit lead for the Toronto Youth Cabinet. We're an organization based out of City Hall, established in 1998. and we're Toronto's official youth advocacy body. Over the years, we've advocated and achieved major advances for youth, and including pushing for free menstrual products across Ontario schools, pushing for new youth hubs, and additional funding for youth violence prevention programs. But I'm specifically here today because we have to protect the bike lanes in our amazing city, especially the Yonge, University, and Bloor lanes, which are most arguably the most used in the city. Honestly, I'm flabbergasted by how the province is trying to take control of our city plans and, telling us how to construct safe infrastructure for us cyclists. Removing bike lanes, as we know, will not reduce congestion and will only lead to people getting hurt. The figure that the province is using is not representative of our city and is intentionally misleading to gain the trust of drivers and support of drivers. And as a city that the province says is experiencing major congestion issues, limiting how we as Torontonians get around will only put more pressure on the existing traffic network, and it solves nothing and will only making getting around the city even worse. Now this is not just an issue for the downtown core. This is a city-wide issue and a provincial-wide issue, which will impact a ton of young people. I'm afraid that all the efforts that we've done towards creating a safe and accessible bike culture for the city will have been all for nothing. As youth, many of us can't drive, pushing us to find other ways to get around, but many of us can't drive, so that forces us to find other ways to get around, cycling being most popular. But how can we expect young people of the city to get around if we don't provide the adequate infrastructure for them to get around? This bill poses a major equity issue for all the youth in the city who can't drive or afford the high costs associated with owning a car. It limits how youth can get to school, get to work, or simply just hanging out with their friends. 6 people have been killed riding their bikes this year in Toronto. We cannot afford to lose another rider.
One is too many.
One is too many. One more is too many, yes. But seeing everyone out here today, especially us fellow youth, it gives me hope that it's not too late, but we can't lose the momentum. Now is the time to give it our all and to fight for our basic human right to get around the city with dignity and respect. So let's tell Doug Ford to stay in his own dang lane and not interfere with our bikes.
Thank you so much, Zane. That was amazing. Now we would like to introduce Phil Pothen from Environmental Defense.
Hey everyone, my name is Phil Pothen and I'm the Lawyer and Land Use Program Manager and Ontario Environment Program Manager with the national charity Environmental Defense. If you've seen those signs that say Stop 413 or Hands Off Our Farms, Forests and Wetlands or Hands Off the Greenbelt, well, all of those came from a great big pile next to my desk. So as with virtually every part of the Ontario government's sprawl, highways, and car dependency agenda, the government's attack on this city's safe cycling infrastructure is not about a good faith difference of opinion. We know that this policy did not arise from a civil servant proposing a way to speed up traffic flow. We really know. I can't explain why, but we know for a fact that was not the civil servant's advice. It's also not a matter of the Premier or Transport Minister personally being ignorant. They know very well that this is going to make traffic worse, not better. Just like with the 413, just like with the government's opium dream 60-kilometer tunnel proposal, with Bill 212, the Ontario government is intentionally pushing a solution, quote unquote, that it knows will make the problem worse. And in this case, they're doing it, and this is the tricky part, they're doing it almost entirely to provoke a fight with us. They have decided to pick the fight with a group of voters that they have written off but which their base and many suburban swing voters caricature and frankly dislike, and to provoke us into lashing out in a way that makes us seem to fit that caricature. In this case, to frame the issues as motorists or drivers versus cyclists, about an idealistic or naive vision of the future versus, being realistic and accepting the reality of how normal people have to get around, between the safety of people who are choosing to cycle because it's fun or for ideological reasons, and the convenience of ordinary people just trying to get by. And because they've chosen this, because that fight, framed that way, sad as it is a political winner for the Premier. The Premier's right about that. And all of this, the reason they're picking this fight is to distract the voters that the Premier hasn't written off, that the Premier can't afford to lose, from the government's outright betrayal on the issues that do matter to them. This bill was dreamed up at precisely the moment that the government's web of lies about housing supply is being cut to shreds. Everything they have done for the past 3 years, they've done because they want to quote-unquote build 1.5 million homes. Well, it's no surprise that last Friday was the day that they had to admit that their policies had actually reduced housing output. We're getting fewer homes slower. That was a deadly story for them because so many of their voters care about that issue more than anything else. They had to admit that there is no hope under their policies of delivering 1.5 million homes by 2031. All right. So this, it's also no accident that this bill, the bike lane provisions that would allow the government to block bike lanes, the regulations that would remove bike lanes, they are packaged together with provisions that still ask the public to let them double down on the approach to block housing. So they have picked this fight so that they don't have the fight, so no one notices the fight that they want to avoid. And so this, unfortunately for them, this fight between people like us who look like us and the government is a fight the government wants and they think they can win. The good news is that we in environmental defense know how to win a fight like that. We wanted the fight to save the greenhouse. The Premier wanted the fight to save the greenbelt to be between a bunch of granola hippies who wanted to save the wildlife and save the forests and who like hiking and people who just want a home. That's exactly the kind of fight that they're trying to frame here. But we won it. And you know how we won it? We refused to give them the kind of fight that they wanted to have. We refused to let the fight be framed as nature versus housing. And what the key underlying point was our whole point, the point that we said, as much as we do love the environment, we're an environmental NGO, you would rarely hear me say that we need to protect wildlife, we need to balance environmental values against housing. We simply said carving land out of the greenbelt will mean fewer homes slower. It was true, we were proven right. We simply said more sprawl means fewer, more expensive homes. And if you just care about getting more homes built, even if you don't like animals, if you don't care about habitat, if you'd be perfectly happy to see every endangered species wiped out, this is still bad policy for you because it's bad for the things you care about. And so there are lessons in that for how we talk about this bike lanes issue. This whole fight, the government wants it to be a fight between their caricature of cyclists as hobbyists or environmental idealists or ideologues, sweaty, yuppie, adrenaline junkies, decked out in sunglasses and lycra hot pants and a racing jersey who feel superior because they're fit and spent. and spent $3,000 on a carbon fiber racing bike and want to use the road as their own private gym. That's the view that they want. And they're saying, well, okay, if you say you want it to be safe, to have your morning workout on the road, that's a losing fight. But what we need to focus on is the fight that they can't win. Number one, there is no way to move all the goods that need to be moved around the city today without the backbone of the goods delivery system that those protected bike lanes have become. Those Uber Eats drivers or FedEx delivery people, those are not people who should be discounted from the debate about cycling. Those are the reason why we need bike lanes. We need to reach a population of 4.5 million in the city of Toronto by 2051. That cannot happen without shifting most of the deliveries that have historically happened by van to small, compact modes of transportation. Right now, the only reason things work now is because we do have the bike lane. So that's number one. The number two is that the person who is most reliant on the bike lane is not someone like me. And much as I love to talk about how the fact I was able to bike to my job as a lawyer, I was able to bike to make submissions at Queen's Park, I biked to court on my from Crescent Town area to downtown every week over the past year. Despite supposed frigid weather, that's not what I would foreground. But what I do foreground is the fact that cycling is how you get to a construction work site early in the morning before transit has started, when you're not on the subway line. That's the person who will get killed if you rip out these protected bike lanes. And a protected bike lane is how you get home from work at a late night dishwashing job. That's the person who's going to get killed if you rip out these bike lanes. It is not the caricature that they have. And the third argument that I encourage folks to make is around housing. The government is already getting its knees kicked out and more on the housing issue. The one issue that they pinned everything on over the past 3 years, they are being utterly discredited on. They are, by the end of by 2031, they're still going to be producing half the homes that they said they would be producing each year with their policies. And unfortunately, blocking bike lanes and ripping out the ones we have are going to kill thousands and thousands and thousands of units of housing. Because my work as land development program manager in environmental defense shows that one of the main barriers to building housing at all is the fact that we have to include parking. Parking adds more than $100,000, even not factoring other elements, to the cost of each unit. And it makes most of the development sites in the city that if we have to include parking, the buildings that would be viable to build, apartment buildings that would be viable to build, become inviable if you have to include parking on it. So the great thing, and I want a big cheer for this, Mayor Chow and the council before Mayor Chow, they have removed the minimum parking requirement. So a big cheer for that. But the reality is, if in large parts of the city, there is no safe last mile solution other than driving, it's still not going to be viable to build these apartments without parking. So that really means that if you're worried about getting priced out of Toronto, a big part of that, if 10 years from now you found you weren't able to find an apartment here that you could afford, it will be because the heads of this policy, they ripped out the bike lanes, they didn't allow bike lanes to be extended. We cannot deliver the number of homes that we need in Toronto without expanding our bike lane network, because we can't build enough parking. After speakers like Norm and Jessica Bell here, who are very exciting, I always find I'm the guy who makes things boring. But everyone in this crowd you're already the converted. So I don't need to tell you to save the bike lanes. I don't need to tell you that it's a threat to our safety. What I'm trying to do is say, these are the smart arguments to make. This is what you say to your cousin, your mom, your brother, your co-worker who is not a cyclist. Don't talk about, talk about by all means how you depend on bikes to get your kids to hockey, as I do, to get them to racquetball, tennis. I've got 3 kids without a car because the bike lanes exist. But talk about how it will affect their lives. Great, folks. And here's the thing. If you do that, if you don't take the easy bait, if you don't give them the fight that they want to have, then you can win. And we know that. We know that because we did win. Remember, they had already ripped land out of the Greenbelt when we got those signs out of the line. It wasn't like they were proposing it and we stopped them. No, they ignored us first. They ripped out land from the Greenbelt, and after a year of crowing about it and bragging about it and talking as if it's a billion.
Oh, get restless!
Oh yeah, we ripped it out. We made them back down. They had to eat crow. They frog marched the Premier's own caucus, frog marched the Premier to the mic, and forced him to reverse that policy. If you make the right arguments, if we make the right arguments on this issue, we can accomplish the same thing here.
Amazing speakers. That was the last speech, so thank you all for listening to that.
We weren't sorry if you can't hear me, it's at max volume, but we weren't able to come around and talk to everyone because so many people showed up, more than we could have dreamed of. But really seriously, if you are interested in helping us in future action, please go to our website, and we have an email address, and just send us an email or text us on Instagram. We really want to get as many people involved as we can. Fightforbikes.org.
And our Gmail is fightforbikesto@gmail.com. So email us. East along Bloor towards Young, using these amazing bike lanes that we have while we can, and fighting to keep them.
And we'll also be in the streets. Yeah, the police are going to be blocking intersections for us, so just keep on going through. And if you're here without a bike, we really encourage you to shop at some of the local businesses to support the area and show that biking is good for business.
So much for coming out. We really appreciate it, and there's no way to make change without a community effort. So all of you are doing so much amazing work just by showing up. Okay, so let's ride! Thank you!
Thank you.